Hey everyone, and welcome to my studio. It's Karen Margulis here, and I'm here for another pastel painting demonstration. I am really excited about today's subject, which is the beach, because I just got back from a beach trip where I spent most of my time sitting around the pool at our house that we rented, but I did get over to the beach to take some late afternoon, early evening shots, and so that is what I'm going to paint for you today. So I'm also going to be using a very limited palette. I'm going to be using a set of 30 Sennelier half sticks. This is the 30-piece Plein Air selection, and this is what I'm going to use. In addition to these, I will use a few hard pastels, and I use the Nupastel brand for my hard pastels. And I like to challenge myself every once in a while to use a very limited palette, because it's a great way to supplement your pastel collection if you're going to do some plein air painting, or if you're just getting started, you don't want to invest in thousands of pastels right from the beginning. So what can we do with 30 pastels? That's what we're going to find out today. Now, I really want to encourage you to stick through the video till the very end, because my paintings often go through the teenager years, meaning they're unruly, they're kind of growing, if you will, and they have to get to that point where they mature, and that's usually at the end of the video. So if you're watching and halfway through you think, oh my gosh, I'm not going to watch this anymore, stick with me, and hopefully I'll be able to pull it off at the end. If you like my videos, be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, give some likes, ask questions in the comments. I'm checking the comments so I can answer your questions. So I'm happy to have you here. So now let's get started. All right. Let's talk about what we're using today. This is a 9x12 piece of Wallis paper, sanded paper, no longer made, but I have a stash. So every once in a while I pull out a stash. I like this color of this surface because it's got this nice kind of warm orangey type of glow, and I think it'll work well for my photo, which is late afternoon just before sunset, with those wonderful long cast shadows and the kind of soft orange peachy glow. So that's why I selected this color paper. I did a very quick thumbnail just to kind of place my scene. I really love the color of the sky, so I decided to lower the horizon slightly. I don't want it to be right in the middle, but I gave myself a little bit more sky and a little bit less sand in my particular composition. So I like to use a combination of harder pastels, such as Nupastel or Rembrandt or Polychromo, in conjunction with this very soft, creamy feel of the Sennelier pastels. I think that the Sennelier, and then this is my odd assortment of hard pastels. It works well because I can get more layers, because the hard pastels do not fill the tooth of the paper as quickly as the softer ones. So I'm going to start the painting by blocking it in with some harder pastels. The first thing I'm going to do is block in all of the dark shapes. And in this particular painting, really the dark shapes, only dark shapes, are those upright planes of the grasses on the dunes. I rearrange the shapes slightly. I'm pulling them over a little bit further, and I'm going to have less sand. Now I've got to be careful that I don't have fingers, and right now I just made fingers, right? You see this finger, 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 and the spacing is all equal. So let's throw in another bit of dune just to break up those fingers. That's one thing we want to be careful of. So those are the dark shapes. The light area is going to be the sky. I'm not going to worry about the sea oats. They will come last. In fact, I'll put those on top of the sky once I get towards the end of the painting. I'm going to do something with my sky. I'm going to pull my marks over towards the dunes, and I'm doing that so that I can create a visual pathway for the eye to follow, pulling you down to the dune area and then the dunes will pull you back out. So I'm going to have that classic, hopefully I'm going for the classic compound curve or Z-shaped composition. So we'll come in like this, go like this, back to the dunes, and then back out by virtue of the shadows. Let's block in the shadows in the underpainting. I'm going to use blue, but I will be changing them. I'm actually going to throw this whole foreground area into the shadows. There's a shadow coming off each section of dune grass, and they're nice and long. I'm going to throw a little bit of the green into those shadows because I want to connect what's happening on the ground with what's happening in the sky. I will alter these again, but this is the first layer. So we've got our darkest darks, our lightest lights, and then now we want to put in our most intense colors. And I'm going to block in the little peak of ocean that we see with a dark blue. One thing about when you are putting water, the ocean, into a scene, it has to be perfectly straight and level. So if you are not confident in your ability to make a perfectly straight and level horizon, you want to measure. And I can tell you right now that it's going up slightly. Boy, I did get it straight, but it is going uphill slightly, so I'm going to make that correction. And I'll probably have to check myself as the painting progresses. So there's that little peak of water. Most intense color is the light, that sunlight on the sand, and it's this kind of orangey light. I'm going to make it a little more orange than pink. Keep in mind that this is the block-in or underpainting stage, and that this painting will change somewhat, but I want to get the block in, or the first layer, so that I can layer later on with some of the softer pastels. Let's check my fingers. You see what I've done here? This is the same size, this is the same size, same size, same size. It's all very much the same. And I have to be sure that I break that up, because it's not interesting when it's all the same. And our brains want to organize things, but we like things that are a little bit unorganized. We like to look at things that are a little bit unorganized. I see some nice dune shadows up in here. I'm just going to put them in while I notice them. Why don't I just make something casting a shadow that way, and then that breaks up the fingers just a little bit more. Alright, so now I have a completed first layer. Oftentimes what I will do is use some kind of blending tool to blend in the first layer, because I don't want the paper color to be a distraction. In the case of this painting, the color of the paper is not really a distraction. In fact, it really harmonizes everything. Having it peek through in areas gives kind of a sandiness to the sand and a kind of a warm glow to everything. But I am going to blend in my sky, because I want my sky to be kind of a calm and peaceful sky. I just want to have a nice soft sky. I'm going to blend it in with I'm using a piece of pipe insulation foam that you get at the hardware store. So I'm covering up the paper by blending it in, and I'm going to just slightly, if I can, pull some of this dune, soften some of the dunes that are in the distance, because I want them to look like they're further back. And I'm pulling it up into the sky. I'm going to also soften the edge where the water meets the sky, and I will work on that a little bit more. While I'm at it, I'm going to just blend in the bottom part of the sand, because I want you to skip over that part and come into where you see the nice play of light and shadow. Alright, that is the first layer. That's a block in with harder pastels. I can keep using some of the softer, or excuse me, some of the harder pastels that I have in my box to build some of these layers. In fact, I'm going to use a darker blue. This is the number 305 spruce blue, just to reinforce some of the darker bits on the dunes. I'm actually going to get that to be a little bit lighter because I want it to recede. So it can't be quite that dark, but it's kind of like I put them in and then I take them out. Put the darks in and then I'll modify them as the painting progresses. Let's see. What colors would be good underneath all the green of the dunes? Well, they've got this wonderful orangey glow to them. So I'm going to add some of the orange to the grasses that are growing on the dunes. I will make them green, but I'm going to mix in some of this orange because they are catching that wonderful light glow. What else can I do before I get to the softer pastels? Could I start in with some of the greens? My grass box, as I call it, is very unorganized, and it's whatever I have in here, which isn't the most organized way to paint, but it makes it a little more exciting sometimes. Making it work, I like to say. So I'm adding a warmer kind of olivey green. I'm going to adjust it, but I'm just putting it in there to start with. And let's go ahead and talk about the shadows for a minute. Shadows are usually, the cast shadows are usually a darker value of the color that it's being cast upon with the influence of the colors that are up in the sky. What does that mean? It means that if the surface that its shadow is cast upon is green, I would use a darker green to begin with. In this case, the sand color is kind of a pale peach, I would say. So I'm going to use a darker peach to begin the shadows. And you might be saying, well, why are you covering up the blue shadows that you already put in? Because there's an influence of the sky, which has blue and green in it, but ultimately there's a slight influence, and I'm going to use a combination. So I'll put the darker peachy orange, and then I will scumble the blue on top of it. Scumble means you're just putting a very light, what's the word I'm looking for? Light coating, light touch. What about the green? I'm going to just throw a hint of the green in there, not a lot, just a hint, just to make sure that what's happening in the sky is what's happening on the ground. All right. Now that I have everything blocked in, I've got a couple of layers. I think it's time to delve into these softer pastels, and I want to begin with painting the sky and work my way down. That way any dust that I create in the sky can fall down and not disturb anything important, right? Because I didn't get there yet. So let's see, what can I use to paint the sky in this particular set of Sennelier Plein landscape sets. I've got this wonderful turquoise. And these pastels feel really nice because they're soft, they're a little bit on the creamy side. So that is a nice color for the sky. There's little bits of kind of got that peachy feeling up in the sky. I'm going to just add a little bit of a pale pink kind of as we get to the horizon. Just mix it in with the turquoise. This is a hard pastel. I'm going to be going back and forth. I like this really light green. Remember, what was I trying to do? I was trying to pull the eye down into the painting by the way I make my marks. So I'm going to just be, I'm not copying what's in the photo in this case. So let's pull some of this peach down towards the dunes. I do like that there's these little bits of a pale violet cloud. Let's try in this box. We have a kind of a grayed down pink, which is really nice. They're a little bit more of a blue violet, but I don't have a blue violet in this particular set. I'm going to add a pale yellow right at the horizon, and it's going to hit the ocean color there. All right, let's see. I think that's about all I'm going to do with the sky for the moment. I may come back and make some adjustments. Actually, I'm going to pull some of my marks going this way, so I've got, if you come in this way, you're actually going to, you can come in both ways. That's what I'm trying to say. All right, so I'm going to leave the sky alone. I'm going to keep going. I did one layer of color in the water, and now I think I need to add another layer, so I'm going to add the dark blue that is in the Sennelier set. That's really dark. It's really much too dark, but I wanted to establish it. And let's see what I can get to lighten it up just a bit. I think I'm going to use the blue that I used in the shadowed areas. That's anytime you can reuse a color in another area of the painting, instead of choosing something else, you are creating more color harmony. I'm going to make some of these linear lines with this water because it was some waves going on. Now I'm going to take my pinky finger, make sure it's clean, and I'm going to very lightly blur the edge, because I want it to go back in space. I don't want to see a hard line, because then your eye's going to go right to it. So I softened it with my finger. I see that there's little bits of surf waves, so I'm going to use that pale pink just to make some lines to represent the surf. Why not white? Well, our brain tells us that the water, breaking water, would be white. However, it's picking up the warmth of the sunlight, so I'm not going to make it white, and plus it's in the distance. I'm going to just make it this dull kind of pinky color. Alright, so we've got our sky, we've got our water. Let's work a little bit on the grasses in the dunes, and then we'll take care of the sand. So what are we going to do for the grasses? We already put down some of that peach. Let's add some darker green, and I'm going to ever so slightly pull my pastel up into the sky and create kind of a fuzzy edge with the dark green. I will come in and draw some individual sea oats, but for now I just want to establish kind of a fuzzy, distant quality. I'm covering up the very dark green blue that I put in because I think for that far back in the painting it's a little bit too dark. Now I'm going to put in some of the olivey green because these grasses are all quite warm because they're in that afternoon glow, the magic hour. But they are in the distance. How can I reconcile that? How can I paint grasses that are in the distance and yet they're still warm? Well, one thing that I can do is I could make the grasses in the foreground even warmer, or I can make less detail in the distance, make them fuzzier and duller. So the olivey green that I used is actually kind of a dull green. I'm adding a brighter green to the foreground grasses. And what else do I have? I think I've used this one already. Yeah, that's that olivey green. I'll just put a touch of it there. I'm going to take, now I'm working with these softer pastels, I'm going to add a little bit more. The problem with these Sennelier sticks that I found is they're not evenly extruded, so you have to be very careful. If you want a nice flat line or mass, you want to make sure that you smooth them out, rub them on some surface. I'm adding a little bit more warmth to our grasses with the oranges that are in this set. Whoa. Now let's go ahead and redo some of these shadowed areas. I'm going to take the softer pastel, so the softer blue, and I'm going to come in and kind of put them on the dunes in such a way that I get the contour, because these dunes were starting to be, they were a little bit taller. They weren't super tall, but they had some elevation, so I'm using the shadow to help create that elevation. And shadows are coming off of. Okay, so I've re-established the shadows with the softer pastel. I'm letting some of the darker colors that I put down remain in place. Let's tend to the sand, and then we'll come and finish the dunes with some grasses. One thing I want to correct before I go much further, you see here where I started to pull up some of the green? It really shouldn't be there. So what do? I'm going to just go over it with the same color and soften the edge back again. So sometimes if I'm painting and I see some things that need to be adjusted, if I wait, then I don't adjust them and I forget about them, and then they end up being in the painting like a mistake. So you have to be very careful. If you see something, correct it and then move on. Alright, so this is an interesting thing happening here. Normally when we paint the sand, as it goes into the distance, especially if it's a light color sand, it's going to get lighter and duller, so grayer even. So typically I would use this color for my distant sand. It's a wonderful gray down pink, and it works really well to push the sand back. However, in this case the sand is glowing. That's where it's getting the most sunlight because of the angle of the sun. So I don't want to cover it up. I want to leave it pretty orange. So I'm just using it to, I'm also using the peach just to kind of settle it down just a little bit. Where else is there some of that color peeking through? Now I'm starting in some areas. I'm going to press a little bit harder. The reason why is if I know I'm not going to make any adjustments to an area, I'll press harder. So I'm seeing where there's light hitting the edge of this little bit of dune. As well, I see some light kind of hitting this area and into here. And I'm using a lighter color. It's not, not as orange, because for some reason the sand had changed color in this. There was a variety of different sand that we noticed, and some of it was hard packed and some of it had a lot of shells in it. So it was a really interesting area in the dunes. I'm going to use this yellow orange for the sand in the foreground areas, and again I've got to be careful of those fingers. I'm going to use a combination, I think. That's a little too yellowy. So I put it in and then I cover it up with some of the peach. So it's just a combination. And a lot of times when you're working with a limited palette, such as this set, you might have to layer with more than one color to get the color that you want. Alright, so now I'm good with the sand for now. I need to establish a little bit more detail in these dune grasses, and then I'll come back and make the final adjustments. So I can use these very super soft Sennelier pastels to create fine lines, and that's really a wonderful quality, and I can do that by using the top edge. And then I get a nice kind of, I'm able to make some linear marks. So I'm putting in some of the darker green. Let's pull some out into the light, because it's this contrast that makes it interesting. But I'm not going to see as much detail as I go into the distance, and that's what's going to give me that feeling of depth. By using less detail the further I go back. So I'm just going to hint at some of the detail. I'm not going to create as many linear marks. Like here. This, I think, that mark there, I liked it at first, but then it became too prominent. So I'm just using the harder pastel to blend through it. That's another good use for your hard pastels, is as a blending tool. Alright, so now I'm going to paint these seagrass, sea oats. So I'm taking the hard pastel, this is a reddish brown. I broke it so that I get a nice sharp hard edge, and I'm going to just make a variety of linear marks. And I've got, it was very windy. That's what I remember. So I really want to capture that feeling of these grasses blowing in the wind. Now I know I said I don't put a lot of detail back in the distance, but I do need to hint at some of these sea oats, or yeah, sea oats. Pull them up into the sky. If they have the head still on them, the fluffy part, I'm just going to press a little bit harder on a few of them, just to kind of give the illusion that they're not just sticks. Are they catching light? Yeah, some of them are. So let's go in with the orange and give them a feeling of some of that nice warm sunlight. Some of these tops of these grasses, I'll put in some orange scribbles. Now, it comes at a point in every painting where you have to step back, you have to look at it, and you have to analyze what needs to be done. Where is the eye moving, and is it moving where you want it to go? And remember, I talked about that I wanted to kind of have this zigzag pattern. So if we were to come down here by these marks in the sky, and I'm going to just take that pale yellow and just make a harder, push it really hard. Love these Sennelier pastels for the ability that we have to make these really chunky, almost an impasto mark. So I made some really nice feelings of clouds pulling us down to the sea oats, and then this blue shadow hopefully pulls us down further into the painting. So I'm going to take the soft pastel and make some chunkier marks. But now I want us to go and visit this area. So this area right now is kind of lost, so how can we get it to have a little more interest? And I think what we might be able to do, because I'm looking at it and I see that there's not just upright grasses, but there are some, I remember there were some wonderful orange flowers in the dunes. So I can hint at a different type of foliage in this middle area. And I'm going to carry it down here just a little bit more. And I think now my eye goes here, my eye goes here. How can we get the eye to exit gracefully? Well, we can add a few little details. So how about a few little pieces of shell, just to give a little interest to the sand. And I'm going to go for it. I don't know. Why not put in some of those orange flowers in the dunes? They were this color. And that way, this color, which was present in the underpainting, underneath these grasses, I'm pulling it back out into the painting. I don't want to get too carried away because it's not really about the flowers, you know. They just kind of, we want to hint at the flowers. So I probably could spend a little bit more time on this painting, creating more detail, but the idea is I wanted to capture this moment in time, this wonderful kind of greenish sky and against the orange glow in the sand. And so I'm going to stop this demo. If I should do any more after I step away and come back, I will be posting the finished painting on my blog and also on my Patreon page, so you can check out the links. I have them all below. I hope you've enjoyed this demo. It's been a lot of fun to paint for you today, and I'll see you next time.